Please welcome your moderator, Hodinkee Managing Editor Stephen Pulverant, and panelists Christian Knupp, Christian Selmoni, and Guido Tereni. Thank you guys for joining us on a lovely, chilly Sunday in New York.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
And by the way, I do that. I introduce myself every time I walk into the office, so as my coworkers can attest. Yeah, so this morning we're going to have a chat about the role that design plays in watchmaking and kind of the different approaches that you can take to designing a watch, and then all of the things that come from that, marketing a watch and selling and enjoying a watch. So I thought we could start. We'll start with Guido down at the end. I thought we could start by having each of you show us the watch that you're wearing this morning and talk a little bit about how that watch exemplifies your brand's approach to designing watches. So Guido, if you can kick things off.
Well, today I'm wearing my Octo Finissimo automatic in titanium. This is our third record breaker, the thinnest automatic movement in the world, and launched in 2017. And to me, it's a game changer. Game changer because ultra-thin watches up to this watch have been always seen as very traditional in aesthetics. In fact, they are codes of the 50s, of the 60s that still remained up to today, and for very formal occasions. And we thought that being Italian brand, being a brand that has elegance in its DNA, in its soul, we wanted to bring ultra-thin watches in today's world. And it's an ultra-thin for our generation. And the second thing for which it's a game changer is the weight, because it's extremely light, it's only under 70 grams, and it gives you a different sensation on your wrist. So when you wear a watch like this for some days or weeks, and then you put back something on you used to wear before, you find it different, you find it bulkier, heavier. So these two things makes the watch something that is a breakthrough, in my opinion.
Great.
Great. So for me, I would say, on the contrary of Guido, I think I'm not from his generation, so I'm sorry, I'm from the old generation of ultra-thin guys. So today, I have the pleasure to wear a Vacheron Constantin ultra-thin, minute repeater, skeleton, so in platinum. So I think for me this is a quintessential Vacheron Constantin in the sense that we have the great complexity of the movement, so it's a minute repeater, a great deal of craftsmanship, so it's fully skeletonized. We have removed more than 50% of the for this minute repeater, and I think also this is a very long-lasting design. This is based on a design from the 40s, and for me, I think it's showcasing a very interesting image of Vacheron Constantin, so a classic brand, but with a lot of care into the design, the technicality, the craftsmanship, and also I would say decorative crafts which are associated with the world of watchmaking. In that kind of watches, the so-called skeletonization and the engraving. So for me, it's a really wonderful example of what can do Vacheron Constantin in terms of finest watchmaking.
Great.
I'm wearing one of the Paul Weber watches today, a watch we have launched this year in the context of our 150 years jubilee. And this watch also resembles actually two aspects which are very important to IWC. One is really going back to the history and being an innovator in technology. This was a completely unseen and very innovative way to display time, not using hands but discs in the 19th century. But at the same time also to translate this into a contemporary design. So we're not doing per se vintage watches, but really see the purity and the clean lines of this initial design and translate this into something which works in our contemporary context. And so this working between the past and the future, merging actually strong design codes of the past and bring some innovations, some new aspects, materials and design lines to new products. This is actually what IWC is about.
Great. And before we get too much into really into the weeds here, I think it's important that we establish a sort of baseline context for what we're talking about. So for each of you, what is the process like of designing a watch? When we say, you're designing a watch. What does that process look like at your brand? Maybe we'll start right here.
Design is never really a linear process. It's, I mean, how much we always want to make it a structured process. In fact, design depends on an idea and a creation, and that is, design process can take 2 years if we follow the books and to develop something, but this also can take 10 years. This watch, for example, was something I saw when I joined RWC 10 years ago in our museum, and this always was in my mind, and we did some pre-studies during these 10 years before we finally made it a product. Other innovations or other designs, for example, the Da Vinci line is something when we relaunched this 2 years ago. This was something we were working on for 8 years in different design directions, exploring completely different design directions. Sometimes also very much depending on the so this would also resonate in the way the design concept looked over these 8 years. It's something you can't really put into a defined process. But if you look pure at the product development process, taking aside the idea and the initial spark of what you want to do, then it now takes us around about 2 years really from the first sketch to the final product in the market. And over these 2 years is really one year of design exploration, design concepts, drawings, renderings, prototypes, and then the second year is almost completely homologation, industrialization, pre-production, securing the standards of a product which comes into the market with on a quality level our customers expect today.
Great. And Christian, is it a similar
design process? I would say yes. A bit like Christian, I would like to explain. So on one side we have collections which are like overseas patrimony, traditional, for example, who are, we have strict codes, etc. So these are watches that we are developing, and we are incorporating new movements within these existing lines to stretch the offer, for example. And we have other product lines or collections which are a bit different. I would mention Metadata, so the decorative crafts in watchmaking, which is something which is a bit much more creative. So we can have different shapes, we can incorporate other crafts coming from other areas, for example. So it's a more creative approach. And we also have what we call les cabinotiers, which are bespoke timepieces made to order pieces, which is another, let's say, creative playground for the designers. But to come back to design process, it's pretty similar. So everything starts in the Vacheron Constantin design studio, and our designers are sketching by hand the cases. And very soon we are going into 3D with the help of our digital designer, who is really transforming the sketches into something which is three-dimensional. And this is a very important step for us. We really take a lot of time into making sure that every shape is correct. We always try to find a good balance. It's always a matter of good proportions, etc. So we do mock-ups, we do digital renderings, and we take a lot of time into designing the dials. I don't know how it is for you guys, but the dials is a very special and complex part of a watch. So at the end of the day, similar to you, Christian, so we need, let's say, depends on the project, 18 months up to, let's say, two years. And in certain cases where we have technical lines, such as, for example, the overseas line, it took us a little bit more from scratch to develop the whole line. Okay.
And at Bulgari?
Bulgari, we're always a bit different because being Italian, we have things are, the processes in our company are a little bit smooth, I would say like this. So I think it's more than 10 years that I don't see a document that passes to creativity. But that is truly the essence of getting to an extra mile in aesthetics, in my opinion. I have the chance to have over 300 people working with me in the watch division, and design is for sure the soul of what we do. And so I tend to give the maximum freedom to design until even a couple of weeks after the milestone was saying, no, we missed the launch if we don't. As we were saying, design is not a process. It's creativity has to blossom, and you don't never know when you get that extra inch to make that difference. If you think of this watch, it took 6 years to make the movement. That was, if you want, not a mistake, but a struggle, because it was supposed to come out earlier. But in those 6 years, the evolution of the thinking of how the aesthetic would have been gave us the opportunity to get to a sandblasted finishing with this kind of accuracy in the brand. So there is a sort of dilemma between the technical guys that now understood, because before, no, I want to know how many pieces I do, I want to know how much time I have to develop, etc. And all the quality side still works like this. Don't worry, the watches are extremely reliable. But I always give an extra inch of freedom to design to catch that. And the most important thing is that we stop looking at competition. I mean, I don't believe that a customer would buy something because the market is asking for it, and so we have to follow what the market is asking. Serpenti Tubogas, that is our bestseller for ladies, that wraps around a wrist, is not born by a benchmark or by market research to get an idea. It's born by deep diving in your brand and understanding who you are. Same thing for the Finissimo.
Interesting. I think we have represented here, you know, three brands with deep, real heritage, and 3 different approaches to engaging with that heritage today. So I think maybe we'll start with Christian. You know, Vacheron is the oldest continuously operating watch manufacturer in the world. How does the kind of weight of that heritage and the depth of that heritage play into how you think about new products?
So obviously it plays a very important role, since we are convinced that heritage for us is really a treasure. So I think for us, we have the chance to have our archives, which are coming from the very, very early years of the company. And for us, we see our future when looking at the past, meaning that we think that we have the chance to be one of the benchmarks in classic watchmaking. And for us, it's a very important element, and we are really taking a lot of care into every new design that we are offering, to make sure that we incorporate elements which are coming from the past. I'm not talking about the term DNA, because this is so much marketing minded, but you see what I mean. So I mean, for us, it's important to be consistent in the design of what it is that we are presenting, to be perfectly in line with what we have done. But on the other side, it's a very narrow path, because we have to create watches which are creations from the 21st century. And we have to make sure that we don't do, vintage watches or old-looking watches, or redoing the same watches as we have made 80 years ago. So for us, it's a narrow path, and I think this is what is very interesting at Vacheron Constantin, this tension between the past and today. And I think that today the success of the patrimony timepiece, for example, is really a good example of this tension between past and modernity. So this is something that we are really looking at when we do new designs. And in addition, I think that globally speaking, this long-lasting heritage is a fantastic opportunity for us to showcase our creativity in terms of shapes, in terms of displays, etc. And we are playing, if I may say, with this when we design watches in a historic collection. And just to mention a few of them, so the American 1921 is a good example. And obviously, I'm talking about the chronograph Corne de Vache from 1955 that you guys at Odinki know well. So these are examples of Vacheron Constantin creativity. And for me, it's always been a fantastic opportunity. It's a great pleasure for me to work with this challenge of every day revisiting the past, but really being very concerned about offering a product which will be, or a timepiece which will be totally in line with today's expectations and today's clients.
Great. And I think IWC represents, if we think about a deep approach to heritage, another angle on that. You have these core collections that represent kind of milestones in the brand's history, and every few years, each of those collections gets kind of revisited and so we've just seen the other day the first teasers from SIHH 2019, and it looks like it's going to be a year for pilots' watches. How do you take something and make sure that this new collection of pilots' watches both respects the old pilots' watches and feels like an IWC pilot's watch, but is also something new and engaging that consumers can look at and say, okay, this is something new and something forward-looking?
It's exactly the fine line Christian is describing, to move between the past and the future, to respect the codes of the brand and each particular product line, but still to add something which is contemporary, which is new, which is innovative, but which is not losing connection with the brand. If you go too much on one side, to the historic side, you repeat yourself, you do vintage watches. If you go too fast forward, you lose the connection with the brand and do a kind of random new design concept. And this is with every collection, with every product, we move on this fine line between the past and the future. And sometimes we go a little bit more progressive with new lines like the Aqua Timer, where we introduce a new bezel system or something like this. Other times we stay a little bit closer to the classic codes and play with color, material, with detailing, and but also the storytelling in IWC plays a very important role and also adds new aspects for the materialization and the color codes, like what we presented at the pre-SHH, this partnership now with Silver Spitfire Longest Flight, an amazing story about the history of Spitfire and this amazing piece of engineering this airplane is. And so this also inspired us to go back to the history of specific finishes with specific material and color codes, and this is what sets us apart from many others, that we not only constantly referring to our history, but we also open new angles in the storytelling. We're not telling about the watches we used to do 80 years ago, but we still add something which is contemporary, which is happening now. We have a fantastic adventure next year with the Spitfire flying around the world, with a couple of stopovers in different countries. So this is happening here and now, and this is what makes us relevant and what makes us as interesting nowadays.
Great. And at Bulgari, I think the Octa Finissimo is kind of a unique watch, I think, in the market, and it feels both very Bulgari, but it also doesn't look like anything. Achieve that. How do you achieve that kind of feel without kind of directly referencing something from the past?
Well, heritage in our brand is very important too, because a luxury brand has this roots now that are the soul of it, the brand, no? The soul of the family, the soul of the clients who made it internationally famous. So we became internationally famous with Hollywood stars that came to Rome in the 60s during the Dolce Vita. So you can imagine that you have a quest for being a bit not following the flow. No, an artist is making his own life, is making his own choices. So we're not scared about filling a white piece of paper from scratch. When you do that, you have to specifically know the soul of the brand and then know what sensation you want to have. So when we design something new, because we're talking about design, but in watchmaking, design can be a new model of something existing, which is a dial basic animation, or it can be from scratch something like this that didn't exist before. So this scares. To start in a path that is really unknown, it's a scary thing to do, because you have to be extremely talented to keep everything in balance. But when you're designing something, you have three options: I like, I don't like, and then wow. Okay. Even yesterday night, people who saw this watch at dinner for the first time in flesh, the reaction is an emotion that you can't keep in. You have to say, it's really something different. And you have to try it on to understand it. No? So we were looking for something that defined us, because We did our mistakes in the past. We got lost in the first decade of the century. So we really were saying, what do we stand for when we want to talk about a man watch? We stand for elegance, masculine, very strong in character, but accompanied by the highest skills that you can put in watchmaking, because we take that from the heritage of Gergent and Daniel Roth brands that we acquired 20 years ago. So it's the summa, if you want. To me, it's the frontier of masculine watchmaking today.
Great. We've seen a push over the last number of years towards vintage-inspired designs, and that's something we've obviously been a part of. And I wonder, I've had conversations with watchmakers and watch designers and watch collectors in the past about whether or not this is a trend. Is this look back to the kind of mid 20th century something that's a trend, or is this actually a return to some fundamental principles that kind of govern watchmaking? Are we returning back to where we should be, or is this just another design trend? And I wonder if you have thoughts on that, and if it is a trend, where are the next big ideas going to come from? And I kind of open this up to whoever.
I wouldn't call it a trend, but we're dealing with products which are designed to last, for decades, sometimes even for generations, and that this doesn't only affect the technical quality of the product, but this also means an aesthetic longevity we are aiming for. And this timeless design is part of our DNA, and many other brands also have proven over time that specific designs will last and people will like over many decades, and especially in the context of mechanical next to digital tools and so on. I think this idea of aesthetic longevity is very, very important, and this is why people in furniture design, in watch design, sometimes also even in fashion, go for very classic designs. I mean, the style of a classic suit hasn't been really significantly revisited the last 100 years. So this is what people go for.
Interesting.
Okay, so I think talking about the notion of is vintage really a trend in watchmaking. So I think yes, certainly for it depends really for a brand to another one. So I don't want really to talk only about Vacheron Constantin. For us, I mean, okay, we have a long history and we're doing vintage watches since many years. But I think there is a better, you were mentioning also from watchmaking. Think about, for example, the cameras. For example, I have a Fuji camera, so I'm not working for Fuji, but it looks really like a camera of the 60s or 70s, and it's very interesting to try to find why we are so much interested into vintage. It's probably because in terms of industrial designs, the 50s have been certainly a great source for inspiration for many people. I'm talking about cars, planes, even trains, etc. And I think also that we are living in a very digitalized world. So everything, is really going so fast that probably we are a bit. We would like to come back to an era in which time had a different meaning. So we could have enough time to look at the time, and it was the 50s were also a time in which objects were very much long-lasting, much more than now. So I think there is a kind of nostalgia about this analog world, if I may say, which is little by little disappearing. So that is my 2 cents explanation for vintage trends. So maybe, Guido, you have others idea to share?
Yeah, of course. I think heritage watchmaking is a Western expression, with the exception of Seiko and other brands. But if you look at true luxury watches, they are Swiss or they are European as a soul. So the Western world was looking at the future as a better place to be until a certain point of last century. So you start talking about heritage when the Western world started to think that there is a bit of uncertainty in the future, and so you start looking back and saying, well, it was better before. That is the true reason for me for vintage. But each vintage watch, in its way, was disruptive when it came out. So what I tend to refuse as a person, first of all, is that the future is not a better place to be. So we should be forcing ourselves to define and create things that could be a future vintage, because if we stop doing that, I think it's not exciting anymore. So I strongly believe that to have a vintage passion, that is totally okay. I mean, I'm not against it, but let's not limit us just to look at the past. We have to really fill our piece of paper. A white piece of paper is a beautiful thing to attack.
One of the things I like about what you said there is you get at the underlying kind of emotional value of these products, right? These are products that give us a sense of who we are and what we aspire to be and where we want to go kind of as a people. And you know, design often gets thought of as aesthetics, as window dressing. You know, the design of something is how something looks, but really fundamentally the design is how something works. You know, it's function. And we were speaking earlier, the four of us, about this idea that a watch's value at this point isn't a mechanical function so much as it's an emotional function. Absolutely. At this point. Nobody needs a mechanical watch to tell the time. They need a mechanical watch to give them a feeling. And I wonder, it's easy to sit down, or not easy, but it's more straightforward to sit down and say, here are some mathematical problems I need to solve. Here are some engineering problems I need to solve. Sitting down and saying, here are some emotional problems I need to solve is a much more amorphous thing. So I wonder for the three of you, how do you, when you're creating a product that not only has to mechanically work, but also emotionally work, how does that impact the design process?
Can I?
Absolutely.
So we've been talking a lot about men, but 1/3 of the industry is women. No? So I've always been asking myself why the majority of ladies' watches are a smaller version of a man watch. It's like if a lady comes out from here, no? No. You women should rebel yourself to this. I mean, that's the idea of the serpenti. So when we as a jeweler, obviously, and as Italian, speak to women in a certain way, and the sensuality has to be in in the emotion. So the serpenti to me is the most sexy watch you can put on the wrist of a lady, because it wraps around, you fiddle with it, you play with it, and it's extremely feminine. And you can put it in any occasion. No? So that is, in a creative process, a way to say, I have a woman, what kind of woman do I have in mind? A woman in charge, a woman that has a strong personality, a woman that is charming, and what should she be wearing? And then you start filling a white piece of paper. Who am I? I'm a jeweler, I'm Italian, I'm warm, I live outside, so the light of the day is different than in Paris or in New York. These are all elements that make up a culture and an interpretation of it. So, and this is another way to be unique. So design is about finding an emotion that, as we said before, which is a sensational emotion, but it comes out from a lot of ingredients, but in the end, you have to have in mind who is the person that will enjoy it and why.
Yes, for me, I would say about your question. So I think that I think that style and technicality are really keywords. So for us, when we have to design, when we design a new watch, we have to. We always consider the technical angle. I mean the movements, the complication, the functionality, the dimension, as something we have to deal with. So our job is really to make sure that the key elements from the Vacheron Constantin style will be present within the watch. So these elements are elegance, sophistication, refinement, balance, and if possible, a little twist in the classic style of our watches. So I think that these days, design or style or both became as much important as technicality or functionality, functions, complications. So this is something. So we are trying as much as possible. We pay the greatest attention to beauty on the exterior of the timepiece, and as well as the interior. So I would say for me this is really the most important for us when we design watches. So it's the duality between design and technicality.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's about emotions, and this is why also market research in the classical sense doesn't work in the luxury industry. You can identify some functional needs with market research and by observing people, but not these emotional needs. And we work very similar to what Guido describes in IWC. In our product universes, we actually create an emotional, we create an aspirational world of sailors, of divers, of aviators, and with every new these adventurous worlds, we create a universe people aspire to, people would like to be part of, people would like to live in, and at least carry this emotion in the watch they're wearing.
Yeah, I think that comes through particularly strong in the way IWC approaches things, specifically because of the way the different collections are merchandised and marketed, and that the design of the product isn't just the product, it's all the things around the product. And I wonder for each of you, I think IWC is an interesting case study here, so maybe we'll start with you, but how, when you're thinking of designing the product, are you also thinking of designing this kind of universe of marketing and events and styling that lives around the product that I think is in many ways in the watch industry actually a part of the product?
Absolutely, and our organization is set up for this. We have a creative team which looks after all visual aspects of the brand. For sure, the product is at heart of that. So we start with the product, but in the design team at Schaffhausen, we have product designers, watch designers, we have advertising designers, we have people from the film industry, graphic designers, architects. So we create the full universe in IWC with own creative teams. From the watch over catalogs, film, advertising, or boutiques, exhibitions. So this is created from the same teams, different experts, but this all comes together and starts actually in Schaffhausen.
And at Vacheron?
So I think for us, obviously, storytelling is something which is very important. I think that storytelling is very, as its place when we talk about vintage watches, for example, when we talk about the history of the brand and some important moments. To be very sincere and honest, I'm not sure that storytelling is so important in contemporary products. I think this is something which is sometimes marketing driven, even I have nothing against marketing. But I like very much what Guido was saying when he was talking about the wow effect. I think the wow effect is really coming from the product. So I think the role of the designers, is really to create or to gather ingredients that can create this wow effect. Because I think in fine watchmaking, the truth remains in the product. So if you can do many things, you can have a wonderful story. If your watch doesn't look so exceptional, then I don't think you will be successful. So that's why I think the integrity of the watch, of the design, is something which is totally the most important.
I agree, because in the end, when you buy a watch, it doesn't have an expiry date, no? So it goes on for decades, and you're not going to wear something 20 years after because you remember the launch program of that watch or the story behind. But it's true that storytelling has become a necessity, because the luxury world is full of introductions, full of communication. So even a great product, if it's not well endorsed by the communication, could be diluted and could be wasted. And unfortunately, the luxury world has become extremely competitive in the last decade or 15 years. And much more difficult to make just the product itself stand out by itself. And we cannot digest everything that the industry is proposing every year. I mean, you buy a so it's not that you're branched to what's happening every day. You know? So you need to have products that stand out, and then have the time to be able to be understood and to be recognized.
I mean, I agree with Christian. I think that the brand promise becomes true in your product, and the product is the heart of that. And you can't create an artificial story, but really the product really has to prove what you tell as a brand story. But in the end, especially in fine watchmaking and in the luxury industry, our products are much more than just a couple of hundred gears and a little bit of steel or gold. I mean, the products we create have this aspirational value and this extreme emotional power because of the craftsmanship, the quality which goes into this. But we also combine this with a fantastic story about a brand with a rich history and some fantastic stories which are not artificial marketing stories, but are stories which are very much linked to the brand values and partners and personalities which really live this in a very visible and excellent way.
That's true. As you say, the product has to be authentic, but also the story has to be authentic.
Yeah.
Because you cannot say things that are artificial. No, they have to be true to the brand, and that is the best thing to relate to who is interested in you.
Yeah, I think there's another layer to the storytelling here that I think is interesting, which is the customer's own storytelling. We live in a world now where, you know, once a customer buys a watch, that watch is almost certainly ending up on their Instagram, especially for everyone here. The product to tell their own story, and I wonder how that affects how you're designing a product. I mean, Alton Brown said here yesterday, one of the things that drives him crazy is people taking pictures of food that they haven't tasted yet. And it doesn't matter whether the food tastes good, it matters that it looks good, but that's not ultimately the purpose of food. And you know, there's a watch, you can have a watch that looks great in person and that you need to see and hold, but that doesn't look good on Instagram. And I wonder if that affects how you're thinking about products, about how customers are going to communicate with their product once it's out of your hands.
I mean, for me, it's not only an Instagram phenomenon, but it always has been a very rewarding moment for me to talk to customers and hear their own story, what they have done, what they have experienced with the watches they're wearing, the story when they acquired, inherited, or bought these watches, and it was in life, and this is really truly fascinating. And everyone I speak to tells me their personal story about the watch they're wearing, and this really shows the individual emotional power of this little mechanical thing on your wrist. And nowadays you also use Instagram or other channels really to share this with others, which is a fantastic thing. And but the intrinsic personal story really remains the same, no matter if you put this during the evening with a glass of wine or put this on Instagram. But it's very fascinating, and for me as a designer, very rewarding really to see our products play such an important role in the life of people.
Yeah.
So I think for me, to talking about Instagram and how our clients are creating their own story, I think that internet has been really an incredible revolution for us in watchmaking. So to make a long story short, so I remember when I started to look at discussion forums in the early 2000s, I was looking at thepurists.com in 2001, so I was saying to myself, who are these guys who are taking macro pictures of hand guilloche dials? Are they really crazy? And little by little,
the answer is yes.
Yeah. But let me carry on with that. So at the beginning, I thought really they were just a bunch of, kind of watch geeks. Then I realized that they were forming a community, and they were just questioning ourselves, not directly at this time, and things like, why do these guys think that we need to read automatic in this watch, as we know it's automatic. So we are doing watches with automatic, which was printed on, and I said to myself, yeah, they must be right. So we stopped to put automatic on our dials, thanks to these people. So it's a funny story, but I think that internet and then social media, they have. For us, they have created a fantastic opportunity to be much closer from our clients. So I think it changed everything. And I mean, we are here just because of this. So I think for me, it changed everything. I think, at least for us, it has changed totally the way we were thinking about how to design our watches, how to communicate to our clients. And it has been a very positive evolution. So just very quickly, so I took over the heritage department at Vacheron Constantin last year. So we have an Instagram account, which is the Hour Lounge, but this is not the point. The point is that on my Instagram account, I receive a lot of inquiries from clients, from people who are asking me, should I consider the historic model with the blueprint or the red print? And I promise you, so far, I always remember by myself, because I think it's a commitment I can still continue to do. And I think this proximity between a brand or representative of a brand and our clients is something which is absolutely exceptional. So I really hope that it will be still the case in the future, and that we will be able to answer directly and to interact with people through this fantastic social media. So that's would be my answer.
Right. When I think about the emotion now that we were saying that we have to generate, the digital world is fantastic because it returns you this emotion, no, at a wider scale. So when you communicate and you talk, you're expressing something you have in your mind, and then you have another person that has to understand what you said. And then it's not always perfectly in line. No? So what you project is more than what you think you have projected. And this returns on the watch that we have created, fills in a lot of extra sources of inspiration, because the watch lives on the people who bought it. And the return is much more than what we thought, thinking designing a watch, that the reaction could be, because many more people are interacting with it. So when the Finissimo came out, it was very segmenting. I mean, people hated it. It's normal. It's something new, strange.
But it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. I love when people say, this product is segmenting. Great! Finally, no? So if I prefer to be loved by few than averagely liked by many. You know, nobody will averagely buy you. So you have to really get that connection. It's a bit of a proof, no, of what you've been doing, and it helps a lot to me in building a further and deeper message and communication, because you get a lot of hints from who is enjoying it and why is enjoying it. So it helps the communication team. It helps us in talking about the watch even more deeply. So it's a revolution, as we said, and it's very powerful.
Yeah. Well, we're starting to run low on time, but I wanted to close by asking, all three of you are in positions to make changes, not just in your own brands, but to really influence the industry. So I want to know if you can change one thing in how you think the watch industry at large approaches design and products, what would that change be? How do you think we can make this a little bit better for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Tough one, this one.
Maybe I can start. I would like to say that before, I was thinking about this, something that you mentioned before, I think, which is important. I would say for us, we would like to see, we see more and more women who are attracted by fine watchmaking. And I think that in the future, it would be great if we could really, not talk anymore about this border between watches for ladies and watches for men, which I think is something really coming from the past. So it will be great in the future to be able to design watches that would be no direct connection with the gender, no matter if you are a lady or a man. For me, that would be something very interesting to consider for the future. I think that globally, I would say, I can talk only for the brand who I'm working for. I think for us, our style of watchmaking will remain more or less the same. It's just that I would like to, to have to see this from our brand. But I would like to see more and more watches that would be above simply men or women, something more general.
Great.
I would like to see an industry that is a little bit more daring, because a true new sign comes out every 10 years. and you have a lot of creations every year. So it's a bit of a contradiction that what you create so much and then so little remains, no? So I would like to see really a new creativity that goes towards designs that are innovative.
I absolutely agree. I think that the entire industry has been very romanticizing the past and the history, and I would also wish for much more forward thinking without losing actually your codes and your character as a brand, but not to be too idealistic about too romantic about products of the past and over glorify them. But really take this as some important assets, some important foundation, but stay forward thinking, and especially in the fashion industry, people have been much more daring with this way of dealing with the past, being proud of your past. Every now and then take some inspiration. Stay with yourself as a brand, but really think forward. Yeah, I agree.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. I know it's early on a Sunday morning, and it's a busy time of year in the watch industry. So, thank you. This was a ton of fun, and thank you everybody for coming out. And we hope to see you the rest of today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was great. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank Audemars Piguet, BMW, Cartier, Grand Seiko, Oris, and Zenith for their support in making this weekend possible.